Welcome to this presentation on Recreation Therapy Assessment Basics. Assessment is a systematic process of gathering and analyzing information for the purpose of placement of clients in the programs. It is designed to match the client with the right program and to help determine the client's needs, limitations, and preferences. In some settings, the client must participate in a screening prior to admission. A screening is a mini assessment to determine if the potential client meets the minimum requirements for admission. A thorough, in-depth assessment will still need to be completed once the client has entered into the program. The RT assessment takes a holistic approach by measuring all of the life domains to determine the client's abilities and limitations. When completing an initial assessment, that is the first assessment evaluation, the information gathered is used to establish the client's baseline functional level. This benchmark will be used to judge and determine the client's progression and regression as a result of participation in programming. There is not a specific RT assessment tool that is utilized by every RT provider. Although throughout this course we will investigate different options for RT assessment tools, in general, the tools utilized by the RT provider, specifically for the initial assessment, is individualized to the setting. Assessment tools need to be congruent with the facility's and department's mission, goals, and targeted population. The frequency of assessments and reassessments, the methods used, and the assessment tools used will depend on the client's stability, staff resources, departmental resources, cost of the tool, and scope of the practice for the RT provider. It is important to ensure that the tool yields valid and reliable results. The findings or results from an assessment should be reliable and valid. Assessment tools need to be logically designed and must relate back to the available programs. Interventions are well-defined and systematic plans designed to meet the client at point A, admission, and move them to point B, discharge. And completing an assessment is essential to this process. Diversional programs are activities offered for fun and engagement, enjoyment, and relaxation. Although there is nothing wrong with diversional programs are not recreational therapy. Even though the initial assessment process was discussed on the previous slides, it is important to discuss this essential step in the RT process. As the title states, an initial assessment is completed prior to joining a program or at time of admission to a program or unit. The initial assessment process occurs in two steps. Step 1. The therapist gathers the information from the client. This information should be comprehensive representation of the client, addressing all the essential life domains targeted by the treatment or program. Step 2. The therapist interprets the results of the initial assessment by documenting the findings in an integrative summary. Initial assessments seems to imply that the evaluation must be completed at the first time the therapist visually sees the client. This is not completely accurate. The timeline or due dates for initial assessments are often determined by federal laws, accreditation standards, and/or facility standards. For example, when a new patient is admitted to a long-term care facility, the RT professional has 72 hours to complete the initial assessment. On most inpatient mental health units, the therapist will only have 24 hours from admission to complete the initial assessment. It is possible that the client has already attended an RT group within that time frame. RT staff have to work assessments into their day, and off-schedule programs occur throughout the day, and the new client may already be in attendance. It is very important to know the initial assessment time frame expectations for your facility and unit. If you work on an accredited program, this will be discussed more in another presentation. You must adhere to the standards. Failure to do so could negatively impact the entire facility and the facility's accreditation status. Time management and flexibility are really important within the RT profession. In the previous slide, we focused on initial assessment process. Often students only think of the initial assessment evaluation when discussing the assessment process. However, this is completely inaccurate. Although the initial assessment typically has more defined parameters, assessment is an ongoing process for RT professionals. The ongoing assessments are based on the therapist's daily, weekly, and passing interactions with the client. In essence, every interaction the RT provider has with the client is an assessment. Just like our levels of functioning change daily, so do our clients. These ongoing daily assessments provide the RT professional with the opportunity to plan and adjust programs to address the current needs of the patient. Many times in my RT practice, I had to make in-the-moment changes to my program plans based on the daily experiences of the clients. These ongoing and daily assessments are documented in progress notes that are designed to identify progress and regression toward the client's treatment goals. Assessment is often considered the first phase of the RT process, the API process. But I am challenging you to remember that the API process is a cycle. Yes, there is an initial assessment process at the point the client enters the program, but there is an ongoing component to assessment. Every interaction is an opportunity to make an assessment and adjust programming to ensure the client's needs are being addressed.